And it is Planet Green Shades. Marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, with your host, Attorney.
We have launched. Done this once tonight. Is that bad that I'm doing it this way? And let him participate in any conversation. I think pretty solidly.
Fine, that's for sure.
Friend, 17th Senate District. There was some talk that you may have been discussing in the Zoom room. Some of the questions that one of the things that have been of constant interest for a lot of people in the cannabis reform community is, of course, would or he'd already told you? That's what the status is.
No, everything in the booth there is able to get everything recorded, live audience here, but just what's going on in the legislature. What's going on right now is that we've been debating these expungement bills, much broader authority for residents to have their criminal range of criminal offenses, including cannabis offenses, but also including many, many others. Anything that isn't considered an assaultive crime or anything that isn't something that carries a life sentence. That's generally what's excluded from these bills that are being dubbed the clean slate package. And so 8985 plus House Bill 5120. And these bills together are going to possibly provide an avenue for people to have records cleared for maybe as many as 1 million people here in the state of Michigan. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity. The bills passed the House strongly, and then they came over to the Senate, and we heard them recently. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to encourage my colleagues to hear Senate Bill 416 along with the package. That was my legislation that was geared towards expungement for cannabis crimes, and it covered a wider range of situations. And let me explain. They're still trying to do to improve the cannabis-related bill in the package. So that bill introduced by Representative Meerman is House Bill 4982. And what that bill does is it basically provides a really solid conviction for possession or against 200 the state police records that I've seen. And those folks have their record cleared no matter how many of those they have. Where I think it falls short is that there are, I think, 25,000 people or so who have more serious cannabis-related crimes around possession with intent to deliver or with manufacture. And because the logic that everyone is talking about around this legislation being that we should make everything that's now legal, give everyone who did something that's now legal a path to exoneration, for and I'm still trying to encourage that the bill be changed so that they would include manufacturer charges, because of course it is now legal to grow. It's legal for everyone to grow in their household, up to 12 plants per household, and it is now clearly legal for people to not just transfer and deliver in that way, but for people to sell cannabis, and people are selling it in many of our communities, and it's being sold in many of the communities I represent without any sort of incident. And so. So anyway, that's what's going on with the cannabis-related bill. The other bills are important too, because deliver charges or manufacturing charges or criminal conspiracy charges or other charges like maintaining a drug home or any number of other things. You know, if they might have done something foolish as a youngster or what have you, if you go 10 years without reoffending under the Clean Slate Bill, then your record is going to be automatically cleared as long as you haven't committed any new offenses. And that right there is probably the most significant part of it because it's sweeping and it affects hundreds of thousands of people who have really low-level crimes, particularly driving with license suspended and driving without insurance. That represents a huge number of people right there. So that's great legislation. There's also House Bill 4985 by Representative Sherry Gay Dagnogo. That bill, we call it One Bad Night, and what that bill basically does is it says if you have criminal convictions that are all arising from sort of one transaction, one event, for the purposes of the limits on how many times you can get something expunged. Because right now, one of the reasons why Michigan has one of the most restrictive regimes for getting your record expunged is because we only allow up to one felony or up to misdemeanors to be expunged. And so this legislation gets around that by allowing one, through the one bad night theory, but also by increasing the number of crimes you can get expunged. And now it's actually 2 felonies and more misdemeanors, depending upon which class of crime that you commit a crime in. It's a little more complicated. I don't remember off the top of my head, but basically, if you do, something that's like a violation of public trust, that would be different than, something that is
Public health code. Public health code.
Like a property crime. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was suggesting public health code or property crime or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so it breaks it up like that. And so anyway, that's the legislation. We're still trying to improve it. Like, for instance, I mentioned earlier in the Zoom room before we jumped on together that, I think that resisting and obstructing arrest is a crime that should be included in the clean slate opportunity, but it's coded as an assaultive crime, so it's not included. And that was something that I made an amendment to try change in committee and wasn't successful with because, I think that there's a whole lot of folks who that is a stacked charge. It's certainly not always indicative of an assaultive situation. I really think oftentimes if they really was an assault situation, they would have gotten charged with
an assault
as well.
Right. You know what else is really interesting about that particular charge of resisting and obstructing is that only, I think it was 2012 or 13, the Michigan Supreme Court for the first time recognized that you could one of your defenses if you're charged with resisting and obstructing was that you were justified in resisting. That's not, it's old common law that if you're in a constitutionally protected area and the police are going to arrest you, that you have a right to be protected against their arrest. And they've set forth some rules and whatnot, but there's a lot of people that had charges added to some other type of arrest because they didn't respond right. It's an add-on charge a lot of times, or sometimes someone gets roughed up, they always throw that in there as well. But the laws changed on that to recognize somewhat of some more constitutionally protected spaces. I just throw that out if you're needing some stuff to argue about. That those class of charges have been brutal for people and very little maneuverability once you've been charged with it. Can I ask you a couple of specific questions about some of the various bills? If I understand what you were saying in your assessment, the one that's made it to the Senate speaks to possession of marijuana charges. Is that right? And not much beyond that?
Possession and use.
Okay. And the ones that your bill that you introduced, which it goes beyond that, including possession, to deliver, manufacturing, delivery, is in the ether of the legislature and moving along. Is that right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I would say that based on what's happening with these clean slate bills, my bill is bottled up and likely to die in committee.
Understood.
The reality is that my bill is on this subject, another bill on the subject that, is similar, but, isn't exactly the same, is now moving and is likely to go to the governor's desk, I believe. And so the chance that they're going to move another bill on the subject before the end of the year is probably very, very low. We might be able to bring the issue back next year and try to, provide additional opportunities for folks who, are in this situation. But the time to get it done was now.
You know, it's interesting. You gave a lot of defense for the bill and what it intended, your bill in particular, and I think you were brilliant at describing it. One thing that was missing is that if people wanted to use cannabis, which is not legal, they didn't really have a place to go and get it. So there's people, because it was illegal, you know, but now it's legal, but back then people would sell it. You know, those are all the dynamics of cannabis prohibition. And I understand the only one that's got any legs moving forward is this possession and use bill. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but yours was the first one that was introduced. Wasn't it, or a more expansive one that was introduced?
Yeah.
Is that right?
It was certainly more expansive, and they were both introduced, last year, before the year was half over. I'm not sure exactly when 4982 was introduced vis-a-vis 416. I'd have to look it up and be double sure. But, the one thing I would say to folks is that even though the bills have progressed a long way, and I don't think there's anybody, even folks like myself, who really want to I'll stop the bills because they're good bills and they're going to help a tremendous number of people. But we still have a chance to change House Bill 4982, make it a little bit better. The bills have to go back to the House for concurrence anyway because there are already some tweaks all the way around. And so, making a change isn't going to upset the process or upend their trajectory towards getting to the governor's desk. But we still could make that tweak before it leaves the legislature. And we don't have to go quite as far as I did in my bill, because if you look carefully at my bill really directs the judges. It says they shall grant the expungement if they determine that what the individual did is now legal activity under Proposal 1. And it also says something very particular about medical marijuana, which it says that if they were a patient or caregiver and they were, if they can demonstrate through various means that I list in the bill that they were attempting to follow the law and believe that they were following the law, that they should get their record cleared as well. Because, particularly the folks who are in this audience, the folks on this call know that there were individuals who stuck their neck out in the medical marijuana market, and even some of them to their local police. And they opened up their shops, and they opened up the books to the city council, and they asked for approval, and they got approval, and then they still got busted, and they still had the book thrown at them.
I want to talk about that, but let me return to the bill that's pending right now, the one that's moving along and is likely to get the traction that speaks only to possession and use. Is this the bill that the Attorney General was against? Was it watered down because of that testimony in the House, or in the House Judiciary before it came to the Senate? Or what? Because I know that she spoke. Go ahead.
I wouldn't characterize it quite like that, but and I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what was said and exactly what the reaction was within the House Judiciary Committee. But I understand why you're characterizing it like that. The Attorney General did represent that there is a problem with the automatic nature of getting things taken off of records. And if I understood her objection, it was actually more along the lines of if we tell everyone that that's what's happening, what's actually going to happen is we're going to make the change up at the state police database. That change is never going to actually get made at the local court, and the local court is still going to keep telling employers and telling other people that they have this record, and we're going to have chaos, and we're going to have people who are saying on their job application that they didn't have a record, and then the background check's going to come back that they did, and then everything's spoiled. Even if they could come back later and say, well, the legislature passed a law and I thought, and the state database doesn't. So I think if I understood her point correctly, it was that I don't think it will work if it's automatic because that message will just not sufficiently get to the local courts and the follow-through will not happen, which, I think implicit in that argument is that the record-keeping system in the state of Michigan is a basket case, which, it's true. I mean, that's true. Other states are doing it much better. I think we need a statewide court record database system, but that's a whole other conversation, and it would be a very expensive transition, and et cetera, et cetera. You
know what, though? Anyone that's arrested gets what they call a CTN or a court tracking number when they're arrested. There's very few people left that remain that get a ticket or brought to court for a crime and aren't in the the database with which is then trackable or traceable, so that from any court anywhere, a lien check or even an IChat check will reveal that they had a case in a particular district court. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to identify cases in local district courts. I understand the point that's being made, but I don't think it's that complicated. I think you have a unified lien system that both local sheriffs, the local police, sheriffs, and state officials have, and that's what carries the load. It parallels with IChat, and at the end of the day, if someone's got a printout from IChat that says that there's no, the record's been expunged, and that's all running through one particular database, I think it's. Anyways, I think it's. I don't know that it's.
I didn't totally understand the testimony. I'm trying to characterize it perhaps in a generous way based on what I thought I was hearing. But to be quite honest, I wanted the legislation to be more automatic and for the residents to not have to do anything to file. It makes much more sense to just handle everything from the back end and just get it right. If there's some sort of snag with the local bureaucracy, well, then let's get that right.
Isn't it true that amongst probably even your Democratic colleagues, who have they've signed on, many of them, and certainly the administration, and I think nationally as well, we could say the Democratic Attorney General's Association was on their platform was be pro cannabis. I think the Democratic governor said be pro cannabis. But when we look at the policies and the purview of things, I think the way that we're kind of dividing up what is important for expungements from the one that's going to pass versus the what's really needed, your bill, I would say it kind of explains the disconnect of those that I'm in favor of legalization, tax and regulate, and we got to fix all these social justice issues that still remain. There's a huge gap there of what those two things mean and how we got there. It may not be the most important topic now because of tax and regulate, but does that make any sense? And if it does, do you sense that amongst your colleagues?
It certainly makes sense. And I got two major reactions to it. One is these bills aren't passed yet, and I would encourage anybody who thinks that these bills should go farther, as I do, to contact their senator and to let them know that House Bill 4982 and this whole clean slate package is coming by their desk, and we're going to vote on the floor very soon. Maybe next week, but I maybe also in a few weeks. What I want you to do as your voter or as your constituent is to expand these bills, to give some sort of opportunity for folks with cannabis charges that aren't covered by this bill yet, like somebody who maybe was growing cannabis, who's completely left out of this, even though now it's legal. And if we really think that everything that is now legal should all the folks who got a conviction for something that's now legal and related to cannabis should have a chance to get their record cleared. We should include possession with intent to deliver, and we should include manufacture. So let your senators know that. So that's that's part of my reaction to what you're saying. My other reaction is just to say that right now, when you look at what 4982 does, it does provide relief to the vast majority of folks with a record here in the state of Michigan. It's going to provide immediate relief, at least if the folks are willing to go through the process, to 200,000 and 235,000 people, according to the records I've seen. Whereas those other codes are going to be affected by are going to affect maybe 25,000 people. Now, plus, the other thing that's important is that the Clean Slate Bill 4980, because that affects cannabis crimes as well, if you've got a conviction for possession with intent to deliver or manufacture or criminal conspiracy that's related to drugs or something like that, that is within 10 years old, that's going to roll off as well automatically, and that's going to help a lot of those folks as well. So those 25,000 people are not all left out. Some of them are going to get relief immediately, and some of them are going to get relief from Clean Slate in a few years.
It was troubling, and that sounds good. I'm not knocking. I know that a lot of effort went into it, and like all things, there's always a need for some compromise. I think
I don't want to cool people off from falling in. Everybody should push harder. I want to make these bills better too. I'm just trying to give you the straight information. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just trying to give it to you, let you know what the numbers are.
I understand, and I'm not, there's a lot of compromise that has to be done. I think, I think some people may say that's not even close to enough. But let's talk about the medical marijuana.
So just to interject real quick on what we're talking about just before closing that out, like this might be as good as we get now, and as you're saying, it is an improvement from where we are now. So if it stands, it's still going to be good. And if if there is a different composition of lawmakers that comes in over the course of this year and through like 2022, some of these things could be readdressed and maybe.
Right, but I think I agree with that, and I understand that's the point. And Senator Irwin is suggesting, call your senators now. This is a good time to get it going. It's better than nothing. It's an increment forward, and as things go forward, we're going to return to this issue, and hopefully it'll be in the forefront. But no one's suggesting it was anything that was expected, and that's fine. And I'm not. I can leave it there. As far as the medical marijuana, you said something that, if somebody can establish or prove that they were trying to be in compliance or might have been in compliance, that sounds like a nightmare to me. I don't think any local district court's going to take. I mean, like the reason they have convictions is because they a lot of times ignored their, proclamations and suggestions. I think the idea of some of that discretionary. I didn't read the bill. I don't know what the standard is. I don't know, what kind of threshold has to be carried in terms of evidence of trying, quote unquote. But I'd have seen a much easier path. I think you got a whole group of classes of people that are medical marijuana patients that were, even though they could go forward and do it, they're, usable marijuana thing, the brownies, the no brownies. I mean, there's a whole slew of people that were taken down because of that as being the impetus of the initial arrest. House gets raided. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I think. I don't know. I was hoping there'd be a better path for the medical marijuana patients. Just putting the burden on them seems. I don't know. What do you know?
I understand. The other problem with it is that even if you're not a medical marijuana patient, like a lot of times the records that may have existed on these cases are now lost or they're hard to obtain. And why do you want to put that onus on the defendant to go track down some records? Which is why this whole automatic piece is so important. I agree with you. I agree with you, Michael. And honestly, if you've got language that you can work with me on, I'll take it. I was thirsty for language on this stuff last spring, because it was difficult to write a statute in a way that would try to hit that mark that I was hearing my Republican even colleagues saying that they wanted to hit, which was to say that, if it's legal now, let's allow it. If it's not legal now, let's not allow it. And they really wanted some sort of way to be able to sort out the situation between somebody who maybe had, an ounce or 2 ounces or 2.5 ounces, or someone who had a semi-load full, or like I said, someone who was growing 10 plants and someone who was growing 1,000. They wanted some sort of tool to be able to discern between those situations, and it's not always in the way that the person was convicted or charged. And so I agree with you. My language in my Bill 416 is not the best, but it was the best I could come up with last spring.
And I know, and I probably failed to work harder to get you some language. I apologize, but I think
really did.
I don't know, maybe.
But
I was going to say, I hear sometimes, and I know the Attorney General's. I've heard her speak publicly about what her objections were. I don't know if I fully understand them either, but just in some of the interactions with the administration, some cases that are still pending, I've heard sometimes that. There's the way the past marijuana cases are described is there's like the possession, the uses, and then there's those other ones that are, involve other stuff, and there may be other activity that's going on. There's not just possession, and and there's a real divide there on some of that, and I think it's
that was the same thing Pat Miles said. Remember?
Yeah, but I think it's unfair. I mean, because it's part of the illegality. The illegality breeds that. It's not, and there's the other crimes that are involved too. That whole thing that ties people. And I know it's a hard sell with the law enforcement community, but if someone's got a gun, they get charged with a felony firearm. It doesn't mean that they're on the street corner selling bags of weed with a pistol in their waistband.
We've seen cases where they've gotten arrested at a different location and they were charged with felony firearms.
They're not even home. Right. And the house gets raided. They got a gun in the safe, and they have a grow with a 13th dead plant in the garbage, and that makes for a felony firearm case and
mandatory too.
It's an interesting time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Felony firearm is not excluded from clean slate. So, and it's also the felony firearm. It does get picked up by that one bad night concept in 4985 as well. So, there's a lot of folks who are going to have to wait for justice for from those changes because maybe they committed their crime more recently. But I do think that, anybody who has, one of those possession with intent to deliver charges, but it's, older, certainly if it's 10 years older, then they should get relief from this as well.
Is that what it is? It's 10 years or the multiple crimes in that particular night? Because that happens all the time. They'll charge you with...
I have to go double check. It may actually only be 7 years for that one. There's two different steps. It's either 7 or 10, depending upon how it's coded in terms of severity. I'd want to go look at it one more time to double check that exact one.
I pulled up 4980. He's right. It's 7.
7 years. But no matter how bad that one night was, like for example, maybe a bunch of marijuana charges and a bunch of resisting and obstructing charges, and it's 7 years ago. And what, you have to have nothing between then and now, and then you would be eligible?
I think that would be automatic, actually, at that point. Even if it were a whole bunch of, cannabis-related charges, you could apply in the short term. The resisting and obstructing, actually, though, those are all exempted. Once again, those are exempted from this whole opportunity, unfortunately. That's one of the other clear weaknesses, in my opinion, of the package as it stands now, is that R&O is not included. Resisting and obstructing is not included at all. It's listed as an assaultive crime. But, say, for instance, it was something else. Say it was felony firearm in the example you mentioned before, or say it was maintaining a drug home, for instance. That would be included.
If I'm not mistaken, you're one of the people on the Judiciary Committee, is that right?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and I made these points in the committee. I raised this issue in the question and answer. I push folks to change it in this way, and I'm still working with my colleagues to try to get this change. This change, meaning the one around, allowing some sort of window of opportunity for folks with possession with intent to deliver and manufacture to get into their local court and to say, hey, look, my record should not reflect that me as a criminal, because what I've done is no indication of my likelihood to reoffend, or certainly not my likelihood of being a danger to my community. And I think that folks who have a record with cannabis are going to be largely successful in those kinds of endeavors. Except for there are counties in this state where there are still diehard hangers on for prohibition.
So I'm curious to the extent you can, either describe it if you can, or name names if you would like to. I'd love to hear that, but. Within the Judiciary Committee itself, do you find that it's criminal justice reform orientated, as I described these expungement bills would be in that category? I imagine in terms of legislating criminal justice reform. Is that a breeding ground for criminal justice reform? Would you say, are you working in a group of people that want that and are trying to drive that, or is it the other stakeholders that are opposing it, or that bring a limitation to what's moving along?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time for criminal justice reform in Michigan. I say that because internally to the legislature, there's a lot of bipartisan work going on, and I do think that in the broadest possible sense, the answer to your question is yes. I feel like my colleagues, my conservative colleagues, and certainly Senator Chang, who's one of my fellow Democratic colleagues on the committee, are very interested in criminal justice reform. And I found them to be willing and good partners in the conversation. Now, that's not to say that there aren't still large differences between us. And I do think that, if the year were to end right now, I would not give us a great grade on criminal justice reform. We have gotten some good stuff done, but if we don't get this expungement piece done, this piece is huge. And this is a huge, huge piece that we got to get done. And, we kicked out a committee now, so that's good, but we got to get it off the floor. We got to get it signed by the governor. We did pass that raise the age package, which is something that had been lingering for a long time, was something where there had been a lot of bipartisan agreement bubbling up over the years. We were able to get that signed by the governor, so that was significant. But we've got some other stuff that's also on the doorstep that could get passed that would be huge, in my opinion. One, which I'm worried about, is bail reform. Bail reform is near and dear to my heart, and I want to end cash bail. That's the shorthand for what I want to do. You can see the legislation that we've introduced. There's bipartisan sponsors, and that needs to be done. Another one that I feel is that it's very possible is that there's legislation going to be introduced soon that is the output from the jail and pretrial task force that was recently led by the Supreme Court and the legislature and the governor's office all together. And there's a lot of input from outside groups in that, and they came up with a bunch of legislation. And the part of it that I'm most passionate about is relative to, whether the court's default posture is a warrant or a summons in a case of, like, say, a first-time failure to appear. What can we do to get the courts to not issue warrants when they could issue a summons, especially when the court could do what we know actually works better than just putting out warrants, which is to send a person a message, like, maybe actually try to send them an email, maybe send them a text, maybe give them a phone call, maybe do something besides, maybe drop one piece of mail to their last known address. That's just, it's not very, it's just not very hip. It's not very successful. And the court and the public would get more value for their dollar by not just dropping warrants like it's crazy. And so anyway, that's what we're trying to fix with that, at least with part of it. And there's a lot of good opportunity there. I would say that that's partially happening because there are members who are passionate about it on both sides. And I think it's also happening because there's a lot of outside groups that are pushing it and pushing criminal justice reform forward. Of course, there are also groups who are pushing criminal justice reform and pushing back on it. And, I think that one of the reasons why these expungement bills aren't better is because, a lot of the law enforcement groups are still very squeamish about, the conversations that are happening around criminal justice reform or on police reform.
All right. I want to jump in on that because that's a topic that's really dear to my heart right now, because you said these law enforcement groups are the ones that are doing this. And I think you were the one that educated me when I was appalled at some other show, and I said, I can't believe the police are so involved in policy making. You're like, Komorn, they're so involved. They're involved all the time. They're constantly, it happens, And I just want to step back for a second and tell me if I'm not, and I say this objectively. These are objective factors that are before us, and I know it's not going to gain any ground, and you may even agree with me, but I just want to tell me if I'm wrong here. The Leo groups we speak of that are opposing this are, they live in a world that they have absolutely no liability. If I was to pinpoint the reasons why there are people rioting in the streets, it's because the police have been getting away with some things, not all, some, but for a long time, and it continues on. Our community knows this from the MMMA. There was not clear guidelines, yet people were being taken into court to have that figured out. A lot of times they didn't like the law, they didn't vote for it, so they're not going to enforce it. If you knew the number of times I'd ask a police officer on the stand, have you ever read the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act? They'd say the whole thing, and I'd be, yeah, the law that my client is relying upon to get their relief. But with that said, we're in an era right now where these topics, I think many of which arise out of the war on drugs, are in the forefront, and they're being analyzed from, a perspective of racial inequality. But I think it, expands beyond that, of course, to the encompassing of the war on drugs and economic inequality and things to that effect as it expands into areas that are different populated by race and whatnot. But with all that being said, and this being the forefront, I can't help but notice that the law enforcement community of the state of Michigan is ignoring and refusing to enforce the Governor Whitmer's order. Can you explain to me how something like that can go on, how they expect to have any credibility or by her, and why then, in the midst of all this, you then pass a law that allows them to test your spit on the road? Just try to make some sense of any of that for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can cover all that ground, but to try to give you a direct answer, in Michigan, the sheriffs are constitutional officers, and they have certain authority, and also I think that just because of the way the laws are written and the way that the law has practically been enforced forever, there's a certain amount of discretion that police officers have.
No.
At the end of the day,
wait.
No?
No, that is not true. If police officers have discretion to enforce the law, then that's the problem. That's the whole problem. Why we should expect the law to be enforced equally. The officers are following the order.
The law to be enforced equally, but I'm not complaining when the officer who's speed trapping is going to let the people go by at 75 but not at 85. Right. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And
well,
you know, I'm also not complaining if an officer catches, you know, a teenager who breaks a window and they pull him aside and they say, hey, look, you know, you're better than this. If I'm working this neighborhood, if I catch you again, it's going to be big trouble. I'm going to take you home to your parents. We're going to have a conversation and settle this without booking you. You know, honestly,
they don't do that though.
Handled that way sometimes. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And we can get into whether that enters in opportunities for bias. It certainly does, but I'm not sure that we need them to be enforcing every sharp corner of the law.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that the governor's report on why the prisons and the jails are overcrowded spoke to that issue. They would say that doesn't happen. There's very few times where discretion is used to allow people to, go or give a warning or write a civil infraction instead of, or not issue warrants instead of, civil judgments or whatnot. And I know I'm arguing against myself before, but when you're looking for a public safety issue here, I mean, the governor's of such great magnitude, the whole battle here is like, are we gonna, and I just say that, we're all governed by laws. We're a society of laws.
Yeah.
And the rule of not random rules and rules matter. And, we're all affected by administrative rules.
And the police shouldn't be able to act with impunity, and they shouldn't be able to violate the law with impunity. They should be held to a higher standard, in the same way that oftentimes elected officials need to be held to a higher standard. And so I agree with you there, and I agree with you where I agree with you is that what I think a lot of people are out in the streets mad about, one of the things I was out in the streets mad about, is this culture of impunity, is this sense that, police can do certain things and get away with it, and that there's no way to bring them to account and to hold them to the terms of the law. And we need to fix that.
I'm going to give you the answer right now. It's simple. And I know it may not be at this level, but I think the state could certainly create some legislation that would solve this problem, and it goes to this. You've got to end the qualified immunity. And I know that there seems like you got to train, you got to get more this, that. No. It goes to this. They get a budget. And if they have to pay out, write a check for some constitutional right, some violation of policy, then they are going to train them better themselves. They're better people. More people are going to get into it because it's going to be more of a professional organization that takes things serious and doesn't get away with things and look the other way and the blue line protecting all. If they are accountable and have to write a check for some wrongdoing, it will all change. There's no other way to get around this. Or at the state level, create a statute that allows for causes of action that will hold them accountable locally, instead of, at least to get them into court. And I know that sounds lawyer happy, going to start a lot of lawsuits, but there's got to be some methodology that holds them accountable. Like in the Fourth Amendment is we joke sometimes it's hard to practice criminal defense when there's no Fourth Amendment. It's not funny, though, because what's developed in that law, as you know, is, the good faith exception to the search warrant. They violate your constitutional rights, but they acted in good faith. And the new development, which is absurd, is that the police officers made a reasonable mistake of the law. This is some other stuff that's flowing out. It's not enough that they're that they're supposed to know the law. Now it's a reasonable mistake, and we're going to forgive them for not knowing the law. It's getting ridiculous. That's the court's fault. I'm saying that's arisen out of some stuff but I don't know. I just feel like there's got to be some. If it's a simple act, they'll look at the entire thing differently, and we won't say things like, "How do they get away with that stuff? How could they just ignore the governor's order? How could they just ignore the MMA? Because they're not accountable for anything." All right, I've stopped. I sponsor a bill or something like that to get that taken care of over there in the state legislature?
What, write a check?
No, a state legislative thing where there's some cause of action.
Well, let me respond. So one, qualified immunity. I don't know why the Supreme Court ruled that way, and this is precisely the way they did. If I were in Congress, I'd be working with across the aisle with Justin Amash on his legislation. I don't know if that's the exact language that we want to use or not, but in any event, I agree with you that qualified immunity is a policy that needs to go. On the state level, I'm working on basically 5 points, are kind of the things I'm working on in my office around police reform. That's separate from all the work we just talked about with expungement and criminal justice reform and prisoner reentry and all of that stuff. One is we need better citizen oversight. They're at the local level and at the state level, we need to have a citizen oversight body that has the power, either at the state level to revoke licenses from officers who have problems, and we need to have citizen oversight at the local level to review incidents and to provide that local review. We need to have independent investigations. I've introduced legislation on this. And when there is an incident of police misconduct, that investigation can't be handled by the local police and the local prosecutor. Those folks are all on the same team. And even if they do a perfect job of separating themselves from the people they're interviewing and investigating, it just doesn't work in the public's eyes. It doesn't really work practically. Like I said, they're on the same team. So you got to have, what my bill says is have the Attorney General take that over. If you can think of a better idea, let me know. But we thought about that for a long time. That's what we landed on. So we got that. Then we got demilitarization. We need to demilitarize the police. There's a lot of different ideas that fall into that bucket. The easiest one is that we need to stop participating in this federal 1033 program where they get all the heavy-duty equipment that is really only used to escalate situations on the street. There's also some other legislation that's in play that some of my colleagues have introduced around limiting the use of tear gas. I've got some ideas around that without going into all the details. The fourth item is better training. And so, we have introduced that bill. I think there's a chance the thing on that's going to pass. And basically what that does is it creates for the first time in Michigan continuing education requirements. You'd think that if we have continuing education requirements for all sorts of professions, that we ought to have them for police officers. And we don't want somebody who maybe went through the academy 20 years ago when the training was a lot worse to not get exposed to some of the new methods and some of the new things that we're learning that do advance the practice of policing. Well, and then the other thing that bill does is it requires that, they get training on bias and violence de-escalation techniques. So we're trying to sort of bend the nature of the training and make it less of an us versus them warrior mentality training and more about, how to identify folks who are in mental health distress and things like that. And then the final piece that I'm working on, the fifth piece, is to end the war on drugs. And that's, that really contains a lot of the cannabis law reform work we've been doing together. But I think that work needs to be expanded, and, we need to make substance use treatment available on demand, and at the same time, stop trying to enforce against drug users with police officers and badges and guns. Yeah. Because the reason why that's a police reform issue is because, as you know, that is the reason why police are set against so many of our citizens. And it's the rationale used to do so many of the things that police do that violate our Fourth Amendment, for instance, and our Fifth Amendment that you were talking about earlier. It's just a flashpoint for so many of the problems in our society is the war on drugs.
Here's something, even with all that being said, and that is a lot, how do we get around this news announcement? Wayne County Prosecutor Komorn is to release a list of the untruthful cops.
She did it. She already did.
Okay, fine.
Boom.
Well, why has this not been... Why is this not the
35 of them?
Okay, well, it happens everywhere.
35 police officers in Wayne County can no longer testify in court.
Finally.
So
why not last year? You think it just happened the last year?
No, of course not.
It goes down all over the place. There should be a list. They may get caught in line in court and go get a warrant that afternoon.
But Michael, there's an election coming up. Got to look good for the voters. Got to make sure.
Is that the right? Yeah, that's interesting. Very, very well said. This is the thing. Like, there's untruthful cops. The prosecutors know about it. They're going to pick a time that's convenient for them to release them. How many times have those officers testified since they knew that they were lying and proffered tests? Even so, and why aren't they put on a list when they learn about the lie anyways? This is kind of like the whole game right here. This is like the Brady, Giglio, we're just going to prosecute you because we can and not play fair. It's really difficult for the government to convict an accused if they don't violate your constitutional rights. It's much more difficult if they honor them. But what do you think about that? This list of untruthful cops, and And is that just a political thing by Kim Worthy, or and if so, why now? Why not ever before, or sometime before? Why now?
I don't know. I mean, I think Jim's hot take on the timing is an interesting one, but I don't really know. I'm not inside that office. I don't know a lot about the list. I'm not particularly knowledgeable about it. Frankly, you folks who spend time in court, have, and especially in Wayne County, have a better front seat on what's happening in the criminal justice system at that nitty-gritty level than I do. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about these things, is because you've seen things go wrong in so many instances, and you've seen people get the short end in ways that are unjust, and it grinds you, and it spurs you on to want to change laws and have that voice get out there. So, we're trying to change laws in Lansing as well, but I think one of the most important things that people can do, and the most important things they can hear from me before I have to sign off, is that and this is an election year, and we have an opportunity to vote coming up here on August 4th, and then again in November. I think everybody should be voting for Joe Biden. I think that Trump is a monster. I think he needs to go. I think that is relevant to cannabis law reform, but I also think it's relevant to all these other issues that we're talking about in terms of criminal justice and police reform. But we also need to make sure that every one of us is asking our members of Congress where they stand, and that our prosecutors and our candidates for judge and our candidates for everything up and down the line, what are you going to do to change these things? What's your plan? What are the things you're going to advance at your level to make a difference?
Very well said. I think everyone's got to be more active and get out and make things happen. I agree with you. I think it's been a very tough year for politics because even though I know everyone wants to believe what you said about our candidate, he's really not that person. I hate to say it. He's really been terrible on cannabis reform. He was a criminal, crime law creator, and it's locked up many people. But it is what it is. You're right. It's got a monster on the other side, but let's just call it what it is. It could have been better. But my thing about this untruthful cops goes all over the state. Wayne County is not unique. If it's happening here, it's happening everywhere. It's interesting. I hope that we get some better candidates in that are in favor of justice reform. Do you find the Republicans at all? Aren't there some Republicans? I mean, I'm not saying this to support this, but Jeff Frazier always mentioned that a lot of the Republicans were sometimes you find a libertarian that are pro criminal justice reform. They want to get rid of forfeiture, and they're Fourth Amendment driven, and
P. Lucio was pretty supportive, wasn't he, Senator Irwin?
I believe so.
Of asset forfeiture particularly, he and that's another one that I think that the legislature deserves some credit on this year about. I appreciate you bringing that up, Jim, because it had kind of slipped my mind. We made a number of, we made progress back in I think 2016 on asset forfeiture. And then last year, Lucido was one of the key factors in pushing through more forfeiture reform. I would point out recently, though, that we did pass some legislation that poked a hole in that forfeiture reform bill, a hole that is precisely sized for Detroit Wayne County Metro Airport. But other than that, yeah, the legislature has been strong on asset forfeiture again. And I think it is partly because of some of those conservative philosophies. It's partly around constitutionality. It's also partly around trying to make government smaller in general. And so, I think both of those philosophies feed it. I think there are some interest groups on the right that have been a part of that. And it creates some interesting opportunities for bipartisan work.
Is there any talk of any amendments to the recreational law, the MMFLA, or anything? Is anything brewing about that, or do you think we'll make it to the end of the year without any changes to any of the legislation?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. So one is, yes, there's always talk about changes to the Proposal 1 from 2018. The conversation is always there around increasing the tax or changing the way that the tax is distributed. Because of the way that the recreational legalization came on so quickly, a lot of the revenue streams that certain people, particularly law enforcement, were counting on from the MMFLA did not materialize. And, so there's always conversations about maybe reallocating the way that the money is directed to benefit some interest or another. There was a Senate bill recently introduced that would redirect the dollars. I don't know if any of this stuff has legs right now. The one bill that does have legs that changes the MMFLA is House Bill 4700, if I have the number correctly. That's a bill introduced by Representative Alexander. It's already passed the House. And what it does is it changes the law such that, let me see if I get this right, a family member of a licensee can be a state employee now, as long as that state employee does not have I think it says direct conflict or something like that with the licensing process. And they've tried to make efforts to basically say that if the state employee isn't at MRA, if they're not handling marijuana regulatory licenses, then that shouldn't count against the person's ability or their spouse's ability to get a license. That bill's coming to Senate Judiciary. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I certainly think that there are other people who were left out of the MMFLA, and they need to be considered at this time. And what I mean by that is that I think we should really remove some of the prohibitions on people with criminal records from participating in the medical marijuana licensing process. And I also think that there's a clause in there about sort of moral character. If the department believes that you have bad moral character, that they can deny your license. And I just think that needs to go as well, honestly. I didn't like it in the first place. There's other language in there that gives the department an opportunity to say, hey, we don't think that you're a reputable business person. You've shown that you don't pay your debts, or you've shown that you don't pay your taxes, or you've shown that you flaunt regulatory rules with other licenses you've had. And so there's already those rules in the language that allow them to say, hey, look, you had a restaurant, look what you did with your 990s then, so we don't want to give you a license. There's no reason they had to add this extra sort of catch-all subjective moral character clause, and I'd like to get rid of that, quite frankly. So that will be coming up in Senate Judiciary, I think, likely soon.
I agree. I know of a couple cases. We have a client actually who went through the licensing process himself and it cleared all things and, was qualified for all reasons other than them looking for and judging him on some moral character stuff, which is so subjective and so different now. Like the perspective of what was the board that was judging others' moral character to what it is now is like two different people. It
is.
But
yeah, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. So anyone who lives in the districts of any of the senators who are on the Senate Judiciary Committee, obviously, folks mentioned Chairman Lucido from Wayne County. There are other members of the committee, Senator Runstead, Senator Ruth Johnson, both from Oakland County, Senator Barrett, Senator Vanderwall from up in the sort of, this area, Pinky area, Leelanau down to like Ludington. Those folks all need to hear from residents who are going to say, hey, look, this Senate bill or this House Bill 5700, it's helping, somebody, but it could help a whole lot more folks if we just got rid of some of these subjective clauses that really shouldn't be in there in the first place. And if we also got rid of some of the prohibitions on people with criminal records, because these folks need jobs too, and there's no reason, especially with the way we've, moved on a prohibition now, for these folks to still have to harbor punishment for those actions, so long ago, keep them out of the industry that they obviously wanted to be in the first place.
I want to ask, what the cities and townships aren't opting in. That's the other problem. I don't know if there's no way to force that. I think that's more of a lobbying thing, but.
Well, the voters have to enforce it this November, and I got to go soon, but the voters have to enforce this November. They need to get involved. They need to ask their city council people, where do you stand on zoning for cannabis dispensaries? Here in Ann Arbor, I've got, a few of them around my neighborhood, and nobody notices them. We don't hear a lot of complaints. I think that's how most communities are going to experience it. The other thing that's going to happen, Michael, is that those dollars are going to start rolling in here next year. And I think state and local governments are going to be starved for revenue, especially considering the way we rely on sales tax. And I think a lot of communities are going to say, hey, wait a second, why are we poking ourselves in the eye? Why are we leaving these vacant retail storefronts and just like denying ourselves this revenue while our residents go next door? One of the things that just happened up north, speaking of which, is a couple of shops opened on reservation land. Which is interesting as well. I think that's going to be one of the things that really kind of opens up northern Michigan, because a couple of the reservations are basically saying, hey, look, why not? Why don't we allow that on our land? And then the communities around them who are saying no are really, really poking themselves in the eye at that point.
I thought that the COVID and a lot of the cities being shut down would maybe drive some of that, but I get your point. And listen, Jeff Irwin, we love you. Thanks for putting up with us. I know you got to go.
Thanks, Jeff.
You are a superstar for that. We really appreciate all you do. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And all of you, please call your legislators. Tell them what you want. All right. Good night.
Thank you.
You're the only one we like, though.
All right.
All right, we got to take a break.
Superstar Jeff Irwin.
Got to take a break.
Hit a grand slam, pitch a no-hitter.
It
on
was
the same
a
day.
great segment, but we got to wrap it up.
Excellent.
Gotta,
All right, we're taking a break.
taking a break.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
Hello, I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and I am kicking it at Komorn's office in conjunction with Planet Green Trees. And today we're going to be talking about how cannabis affects your sleep. Yes, believe it or not, over 75% of cannabis users use cannabis for sleep. And we want to know how and why does cannabis either help you or keep you up at night. And we're going to get into cannabinoids. Cannabinoids, there are three major cannabinoids that have been therapeutically talked about and tossed around right now that helps you sleep. You have THC, you have CBD, and CBN. Now, those are three of hundreds of different cannabinoids, and the science is not there yet, and we're still studying it, but we do know there's three main players, THC, CBD, and CBN, that does help you sleep. So if you're looking for cannabis and you're going to one of the licensed stores, and if you're so lucky in your area, there is one there, you want to ask about their cannabinoid profile of how much CBN, how much THC, and how much CBD is in there. Now, the reason why these cannabinoids actually pair with our body and help us sleep is something called the endocannabinoid system. It is one of the many systems in our body. You have your circular vascular system, you have your skeleton system, you have your cardiovascular system, and there's the endocannabinoid system. So your digestive system. So all these different systems help your body function, and so does the endocannabinoid system. It's actually responsible for bringing balance to your body. Almost like a thermostat, where if it's too hot, it kind of kicks on the air. If it's too cold, it kicks on the heat. And sometimes we could be deficient in our cannabinoids, just like we're deficient in like vitamin C or vitamin D. We can actually supplement those deficiencies in our human cannabinoids. We call those endocannabinoids because they're inside of our body, from outside cannabinoids. And some of those outside cannabinoids are from plants. They call those phytocannabinoids. And three of those cannabinoids we're talking about is the THC, CBD, and CBN. And they fit like a lock and key with our system, almost as if God intended it to be, right? So a little bit more detail about THC. I know it kind of got a bad rap in the news about it being the psychoactive component of cannabis, but it by itself is really not that effective at all. It has to have an entourage effect. But THC in conjunction with the rest of the plant matter, when it's in high concentration, it does help you sleep. CBD, it really kind of relaxes you. It kind of overall gives you rest. And then CBN, that is more powerful for the sedativeness of the plant matter. So if you consume it, and sometimes you say, "Oh man, I got a couch lock." You kind of don't want to move, or you're kind of just chilling, or you're sleeping for a long time. Usually, it's not because it's THC or CBD. It's really high in CBN. So those are three key cannabinoids that you want to pay attention to. And because the plant is so wonderful, it doesn't have just cannabinoids; it has terpenes as well, and it also has flavonoids. But there's cannabinoids. Don't want to get too confusing here. There's cannabinoids, there's terpenes, and there's flavonoids. And there's hundreds of each of those. And depending on all the combination of all that, it gives you a different effect. But there's three terpenes I want to highlight. So we talked about the cannabinoids, and also in conjunction with terpenes. And the terpenes I want to talk about is myrcene, caryophyllene, and linalool. Those three terpenes are also responsible for helping you relax. A lot of those terpenes, myrcene, caryophyllene, and linalool, can be found in a lot of purple strains that smell like a granddaddy purple or like a grape babe. Usually when you smell those, it has like a lavender purple hue to it, as if purple has a scent to it, but you kind of get the hint to it, like a grape purple smell to it. And then also with caryophyllene, it's a little bit more piney. That kind of reminds me of like Northern Lights. It's real piney. Those or even some of the cushions or some of the cookies could have that kind of scent to it. So your nose can tell you also, you don't have to necessarily depend on a lab test, but the cannabinoids, you can trust your instincts, trust your senses, and they can also tell you if it's good for sleep as well. So things that have like a lavender smell to it, more of like a grape, purple hue to it, or smell to it, and even piney, those can tell you signals that is good for sleep. And it can be a nice nightcap for you as well. Again, I am Earl from the Cannabis Therapy Network. Check out our podcast at Cannabis Therapy Network on YouTube for more information. And also, we're kicking it with Komorn at Komorn's office.
Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
Alan,
Yeah,
we're back. Thanks for
we're
staying with us.
back.
Alan, I heard you in the Zoom room trying to blame me for Nick not getting to play. Let me tell you something. It's not my fault.
It's technical issues.
He's going to play now.
Yeah.
We're inviting him.
But first, we need to give a shout out.
It's not my fault.
We need to give a shout out
Stop trying to make it seem like
to
it's my
Dirty
fault.
Dan.
That's
nobody's fault.
Shout out
Maybe
to Dirty
Jamie's
Dan.
fault.
No.
Well, Jamie is responsible for
Alan for
everything.
stirring it up. Without further ado.
Oh.
Yeah,
Am I playing then?
Where's Dirty Dan at?
You think because of Alan caused this issue. Alan
being dirty.
I'm here.
Trying to help in the Zoom room. He wants to get you in the glory Zoom.
He's not helping. He's barking a bunch of orders from the Zoom
I can
room.
play. I can play whenever you need.
He's remotely barking orders.
Dirty Dan?
No, Alan.
I think Alan decided what's going to happen. So, I mean,
thinks he did.
he may not have told you.
Yeah.
You may not have been enjoying yourself. You may have been. But he's going to make this. He's going to. There you go.
We have Daryl Berry joined us on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh, he's on the YouTube.
On the YouTube.
What does that mean?
He's with us.
Good.
He's gonna.
Hello, Daryl Berry.
Daryl's with us just in time for a special performance from
Daryl.
Nick Zettel.
Daryl, we don't want
Nick
to.
Zettel.
And Nick may come off as sounding liberal, Daryl. So if you don't want to listen,
Yeah.
you can turn the volume down. Okay.
Daryl,
my
I think
music's fairly apolitical.
You know
Not
how us
entirely.
libertarians feel, Daryl.
Yeah. I still can't hear Steve in them.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we can hear you
we can
good.
hear
Yeah.
you.
Good, Nick. Let's hear it.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. And that was a really awesome. Sorry, I'm probably speaking reverb. That was really awesome to have Jeff Irwin on here, elucidating some of the clean slate packets and the nuances there, and where it falls short is just more room for improvement in the future and stuff we should try to make moves on now. Anyway, this is a recent song I wrote. Thank you for having me on here and for Amanda for reaching out.
Lay down to sleep last night with loving on my mind. Tried not to think of you, but the choice it was. I couldn't say your name, I couldn't breathe or sleep or wink. My mind had drifted off, it hurt my heart to overthink. Thus I faded into dust, and thus I faded into dust. If the stars above are stones in an ocean above, sailing underneath 1,000 moonbeams by the wind of dreams, we may come to find what's between us isn't space but time. And as time passes by, this ocean of love starts to drop. The ocean fades into dust. The ocean fades into dust. With the passing hands, these starlit stones turn into sand. Just like a lump of coal, you're better off to just let go. For you can't squeeze so tight to make a diamond overnight. You'll watch it crumble into dust, return to ashes as it must. It crumbles, then it fades to dust. Crumbles, then it fades to dust. I woke in the night was still, the echoes of silence on the hills. The moon still hung in western skies. The night seemed so bright and nice. The moon stuck around the next day until noon. I promised myself I'd see you soon. Or you fade to dust. Or we fade to dust. Who's to say an hourglass accurately gauges time has passed? My first love turned to second spent. The hours and minutes came and went. Days didn't seem to last, and the clock struck 12 at a quarter past. Thus the years faded to dust.
Really? It doesn't count.
And thus the years into dust.
if you were able to hear that. I don't know how well it came through the iPhone speaker.
I could hear it fine.
Is that an original?
Great. Thank you.
Nick, is that original?
That is an original.
What do you call it? What's the name of it?
It started on Sunday, so it's not even a week old.
Excellent.
What are you calling it?
Baby.
The Planet Green Trees love song?
Sure, yeah, that's the DBA, but otherwise, just fade into dust, crippling off.
We were just writing a song in here a few minutes ago called the Dirty Dan song.
Is that an Epiphone? What are you playing there? And how much echo do you have going on there?
Too much reverb. I can turn that down.
No, I like it.
I'm gonna get the Dirty
I do
Dan
have an
song
Epiphone.
lined up.
Is it a hollow body? It's got to be some kind of hollow body. Looks like, right?
Yeah, it's a Sheridan. I bought it from my friend's dad, and I really like it. But
Sounds great.
you'll see, I've got this is what I've played before. Also a Epiphone hollow body, but I just leveled up a little bit with this, the one I'm playing right now. So, how many songs do I have? It's like
Nice guitar.
2, 3.
How many songs do you have to play?
You got whole set.
Whole set. Let me mess with my sound settings here.
Well, you could just give us. You can give us one more, Nick.
He's just getting warmed up.
He's getting warmed up.
Oh, okay.
Well, here we're gonna do an interlude.
Yeah, I got others for sure.
Yeah, I thought he was.
Here, now I've got another original.
Okay.
Nick, do you have a song that you can dedicate to Michael being a badass attorney in court yesterday?
Do I have a song that I like to dedicate. I like to play when Steve's around because it's about bees and honey.
Steve's around.
All right, yeah,
he's
Steve's
got a
here.
song
That's for occasion. I don't know what I'd have that would be fitting for Michael being a badass. I don't know
Nick,
if that
he
song's
said
been
it's
written
about
yet, but
bees
if it
and
has,
honey.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay.
What?
I can't hear very good.
We can't hear
Nick.
Steve.
Yes?
Steve's excited to hear the song about bees and honey.
Bees and honey.
All right.
My headphones-
Steve's having some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Steve surround sound.
Well,
Yes.
can you hear me, Steve?
Now I can hear
Check,
now,
check.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right,
I heard the story, and I appreciate that, Nick. Thank you.
All right, this is a Taj Mahal song.
And I just want to say really quick, Nick, as you're doing your intro into it, my best memory with you was at the convention, and we shared some vapes together in one of the meeting sessions.
At the Democratic
Eagle?
at the Democratic
I don't know if it. No, because maybe. Never mind. Oh.
Never mind.
Oh, Miguel.
Never mind.
All right, that was just really a false tale, a fable, really, that, you shouldn't do something like that until it became legal.
If it didn't happen, it should.
Well, and especially it was a CBD vape, remember?
Yeah. See, that's.
Goddamn dirty Dan, goddamn dirty Dan. So, all right, go into the song, never mind me.
I hear it.
Sweeter than a honeybee, my baby's sweet to me. Sweeter than a honeybee, oh, she's my queen bee. Oh, she love me to my soul. She rock me to my soul. Rock me to my soul. She rock me to my soul. There's honey in the honey pot. The pot is what you got. And now there's pot in the honey pot. Pot, the pot is hot. Come on to love you. Rock me to my soul. Rock me to my soul. Rock me to my soul.
My confessions.
Rock me to my soul.
I know it. They cover over me.
Baby, won't you come by me? I know
Protector you are.
sure won't you come by me and rid me of my misery? Oh, love me to my soul. Love me to my soul. Love me to my soul. Love me to my Sweeter than a honeybee, my baby, so sweet to me. She's sweeter than a honeybee. She's my queen bee. Oh, rock me to my soul. 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 These songs were made for lovers and lovers and lovers and lovers, lovers and lovers and lovers, lovers and lovers and lovers and lovers, lovers and lovers, lovers, lovers. Ooh.
All right.
Are you going to play it, Nick? Are you going to play at Hash Bash next year?
That's who knows? I hope there is. I hope somebody plays at Hash Bash next year. You know, I really missed it this year, but I think Jamie did a great job, and everyone here actually. I know everyone here was pretty much rock and roll, and this first Saturday in April was still, I thought, a really special event, and I was really happy to be doing it, and incredibly proud to see that it was, see what happened and what went down. I think it was really good for the community, if I can say so.
Did he answer your question, Alan?
I thought it was a yes or no question.
Well, so this year I was supposed to play at the Monroe Street Fair, which also, you know, shares quite a bit of history with Hash Bash and a lot of responsibility for making the day such a special and incredible holiday in Michigan. But I was going to play a set at the Monroe Street Fair, and I hopefully still can next year. And you know, if there's a need for me to play at Hash Bash, I certainly never turn it down. But we do have been trying to get some really great musicians, and I think we've been successful in that realm lately. So maybe if I can spend the next half a year practicing, I can maybe cut it. But we'll see. Do I have time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. Go ahead.
Cool. This is an original.
Out of my left ear.
Let me go, my honey. Let me go, my baby. Let me go running up and down the state. Let me go, my sweetheart. Let me play in the rain. Let me have my freedoms. Let me have my pain. I was walking down the road, man. Piece of paper in my hand, man, I'm about to buy all I can stand before I gotta sit down. The river was a rolling, and my veins were a bulging, and there's nothing like snoring on a cold, dark, cloudy day. I'm heading down a hill now. I fear I'm about to tile out. I've been shooting my brains out, getting high in the name of the greater good. I know that you don't get that. I'm gonna need you to just sit back, make a change your mind and hit that. You have nothing left to say, no more shading from my way. So let me go, my honey. Let me go, my babe. Let me go running up and down the stage. Let me go, my sweetheart. Let me play in the rain. Let me be different. Let me stay the same. if I get cold feet and dark. Won't you blame it on my warm heart? Our loving got a cold start. It's only reached room temperature. I'm on that road again. This time with a gas can. Let me for in my left hand. I'll be gone for too long. Let me get the facts straight. Let me set the stage. Getting to that point now. I'm getting to that age where it doesn't really matter what I think I do or I say. You might have misheard that, so let me rephrase. Let me go, my honey. Let me go, my babe. And let me go running up and down the state. Let me go, my sweetheart. And let me play in the rain. Let me have my balance and let me go insane. I'm sorry if there's something you want that I don't have. All I've ever called my own, I have given to you have. I ain't mad, and I ain't sad, I'm ready to part ways. All I've ever called my own is only what I had said, just to let you know I'm gone and going where you won't find me. The sun is down, but the moon it shines on all that I can see. I'm going hunting, pellet rifle in my paws. I'm about to bag me a wildcat, saber-toothed jaws. I'm down to my last bet. Let me go for broke. Let me set a death trap for her and me both. I'm a-getting hungry, bloodlust on my mind. I'm gonna sneak up on her, gonna catch her from behind. Let me go, my honey. Let me go, my babe. Let me go running up and down the stage. Let me go, my sweetheart. Let me play in the rain. Let me have my freedoms and let me have my pains. Let me be different. And let me stay the same. Let me have my freedom. Let me have my pain. So let me go, my honey. Let me go, my babe. Let me go running up and down the stage. Let me go, my sweetheart. And let me play in the rain. Let me stay the same. Let me go, my honey.
All right.
All right. Thanks again for listening, guys. I miss you all. I really wish I could be in the studio kicking it with all of you.
Nick, awesome.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Nick. It's
Very
very
good.
nice. We're going to have to
Very
get you into the office, to the studio here sometime.
Absolutely.
We're going to get it all.
Yeah, man, I would like to. I've got the time and the inclination. And
what are your whereabouts right now? Where are you hanging out these days?
I'm in Ann Arbor, but that may change. Who knows? My lease is coming up in a couple months, and so I'm trying to figure out next moves. So.
All right.
That sounds good. Do you is there? I'm just curious. You sound so good with that echo. Do you like take it with you out? Do you have like an echo boom speaker that you're curious when you talk you can echo? Just kidding.
No, I just have a microphone and then like this little amp that has it's an acoustic amp, so it has a mic input and a it's by Fishman. It's called a Loudbox Mini. But yeah, pretty handy, man. You can take it anywhere, and it'll perform, I guess.
I meant just in your regular day. Forget music. I'm saying, you know, when you're walking around, you carry it with you for your echo.
Oh no. It'd be a lot cooler if I did. Maybe go set up shop on one of the corners downtown and busk a little.
Yeah.
All right, so we're not going to do any other topics. I think we covered it all at 10 o'clock. Jamie, what do you say? What do you got to say over there?
We got.
Yeah. So tomorrow night, I'm going to be on a panel discussion with Senator Irwin and Denise Kirchhoff, candidate for County Commissioner of Washtenaw, is hosting it. Eli Savitt, who's the candidate for Prosecutor of Washtenaw County, Rick Thompson, and a couple other people. Zara Abbas.
Nice, very nice.
We have a discussion on cannabis reform and criminal justice stuff.
Where?
It's not going to be on Zoom. If you go to, I know the link. If you go to Denise Kirchhoff, for Washtenaw County Commissioner, as a host, I think you can find the link there. Or if anybody's really interested, contact me. I'll make sure you have the link if you want to be on.
Well, you think you'd get some people in the criminal justice system on there to kind of help with that debate.
Post it to a listserv tomorrow and get a lot of people.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, maybe somebody, well, if nobody else does, I will. And then during the day tomorrow, I'll be in Ypsilanti at Oz, which used to be Third Coast, first dispensary in the state, and celebrating going fully legal there. Daryl's still a part of that. Darren McCarty, former star football wide receiver Braylon Edwards will be there, and a few others, Rick, and so it'll be.
So you guys will be about a block away from me.
Yeah.
I'll send you a smoke signal from a block away.
Cool.
Tom Brady was there.
What's that?
I think.
Maybe I'll swing by.
Yes, please do. I mean, it's there's going to be Oz masks handed out to those who need them or want them, and you know, see how it goes. There's going to be like some local politicians and stuff there.
What's the purpose of the gathering?
They are recognizing the transition into becoming Oz from Third Coast and going totally legal, and trying to promote, I guess, and recognize it's a good thing and for the city and stuff like that.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
That's great.
Yep, so that's,
You got a packed day tomorrow, Jamie.
Yeah.
What else are you doing?
We need a song to celebrate.
I think that's a perfect idea.
Dirty Dan, goddamn dirty Dan, goddamn dirty Dan, goddamn dirty Dan.
I just may say, I
It's a
was
dirty Dan song. Dirty Dan, goddamn dirty Dan. I've been writing.
Let Alan talk.
There we go. See, that's my vision.
I was just going to say that I had the
See,
pleasure
Amanda was
of
supposed to
listening
catch on and be my
all day
female
yesterday
off-key
to
female
Michael
vocal
Komorn
in the background going,
having a very
dirty
serious
Dan,
case
dirty
of
Dan,
preliminary
goddamn
examination.
dirty Dan,
And he just got it right up. And while the preliminary exam's not over, I think it's this next week to give an announcement that he kicked ass again on a serious criminal case in court.
This is a great background song for Alan's narrative there.
It really was.
It really accompanied it well. It was like a guitar harmonies from Detroit Rock City with Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley. I mean, one of the first real metal guitar harmonies that you could ever hear on the radio.
Yeah.
It was that. That was Dirty Dan's song and Alan's narrative.
And the vocals
Hand
on
in
that,
hand.
that great duo vocal was both Steve Miller and Steve Miller.
I was doing it all. I had the leads, the backups, the female.
If anyone is ever accused of any serious criminal conduct, and they want somebody who's going to fight for them tooth and nail in court, there's only one choice in the state of Michigan, and that's Komorn Law. KomornLaw.com, 800-656-3557.
Alan, what kind of kangaroo show were we involved in there?
Wow.
Seriously. I'm glad we were able to text and stuff, but it is like, right, is this some kangaroo stuff? One of my objections was like, wait a second. Now the cop's a doctor? What is going on here? How does he all of a sudden...
junk science to me.
I mean, did not understand what's good. The cop says,
It was like he was fucking making some shit up.
He shows up, he's like... The medical examiner gets up, is like, there's no homicide here. So like, fuck. Okay,
Son of a bitch.
Okay, you get up there. What do you do? Like you're like, okay, well, I came later and I am trained in accident reconstruction.
I'm gonna go. You know what they go to
Great,
at that point?
Okay. Your accident and reconstruction. Now, what did you do about it, your accident and reconstruction? Really nothing. But okay, what's your opinion? I'm like, what's going on here? How are you offering an opinion? You know, and he
There's
says,
a name for this plan, Michael. They call it the MSU plan. Do you want to take a guess?
MSU.
Come on.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Make shit up.
Make shit up plan.
Yeah.
Right,
They go to it every time, and they've been getting away with it for years. You want to tell me there's only 35 of them on that fucking Wayne County list?
He says something like, I have no training in blood splatter, but sometimes what happens is a body
Michael was like, Michael threw a flag
out
on
of
the
a
play.
car, and when they're flying, blood will drop off, and there's splurts. I'm like,
Yes, Michael threw a
what is the
flag
story that
on
he's
the
done with?
play? Oh, it was fantastic. Whoa, Judge! Whoa!
Did I call it timeout? That's my other. Timeout. Timeout. We gotta.
Oh my goodness!
Then the cops like, and I disagree with the medical examiner. I'm like, really? When does that matter?
Because he is an accident reconstructionist, Michael. That is why.
And
makes sense.
His
huh, Jim?
medical opinion is valid because he slept in a Holiday Inn last night.
Oh, yeah.
And because he wasn't listed as a witness.
Or they even gave us a report.
Yeah.
Or they gave us there's no
report.
He gets 3-page thing, nothing about. He's like, yeah, sometimes we'll do like the distance and stuff, take measurements and all that shit.
But yeah, I didn't really feel like it.
I think there's people out there that think we're making this shit
So
up
here
right
you go.
now, and
So
we are not doing the MSU. This is true.
This is how this thing went down. He goes, well, I decided that it wasn't a hit and run after I watched the video. So I go,
yeah.
Does your training in accident reconstruction also involve some enhancement of your ability to watch a video? You know what I mean? Like, we all can watch the fucking video. Why does your fucking viewing of the video differ from anyone else's, you know?
Right.
So what we did is then we backed him into that he couldn't see what he said he saw. He said that the body was never hit, but he's being blocked the entire fucking time. And the other lawyer got up and took him through frame by frame by frame. After I had him admit that he couldn't see anything, he's like, it was a slaughter. It was a slaughter. He was left with his guts open in the middle of the fucking floor.
To be continued, ladies and gentlemen.
You know,
to be live on YouTube.
Alan, they're going to try to get in the statements on that's
Viewing
the
it
next play.
live.
They're going to try to get the whole fucking thing on the statements. What do you think about that?
I'll talk to you after we end the show.
Are we still on the show?
Yeah, we're still on the air.
Okay, good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, good show.
Excellent.
Good seeing Nick. Nick, I like
Thanks,
your man
Nick.
bun. Nice man bun, Nick.
Good seeing
Thanks,
you.
man.
I mean,
It's getting hot down
did
here,
that
and,
damaging or punishing, did I?
If it makes you all feel better, you can call it a highball.
What
I don't know.
happened?
Or just
Yeah.
a bun. Does it have to be a particular?
Yeah, what makes it? Yeah, there's.
Well, I realize, you know,
I like
I
the
have this-
fluid bun.
yeah. Well, I know that because barbershops and the coronavirus thing, so we understand.
Okay.
I'm thinking about going with the cinnamon buns, like the Princess Leia.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
Right.
Kitties, but you know, hey, someone could pull it off. I don't know if that person is me.
All right,
but
buddy.
It's worth a try. Worth a try. Take a few snapshots just to say you did it.
All right. What do you
All
think,
right.
Michael?
Well, thank you again, Nick, for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon.
We're going to close it off with the instrumental of the Dirty Dan song.
Next time we'll have
Take it away, Michael.
Song.
Yeah. And thanks for helping us run
the instrumental version.
And also, thanks for helping us let Senator Irwin do his.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Hello and welcome to Planet Green Trees. I am Earl, the host of Cannabis Therapy Podcast, and I'm here to give some information about cannabis so that we can have a well-balanced understanding of cannabis. And today we're going to talk about how to tell the sex of a cannabis plant. Yes, by the end of this episode, you should be able to identify if a plant is male and female, and why does it even matter, right? Cool. How to tell the sex of a cannabis plant. Now, I am live from Komorn's office. If you hear Komorn's voice, it is because he is on a rant with a client, and that is okay. But we're going to push through this. Now, how to tell the sex of a cannabis plant. Tommy, you can throw that first image up there. Thank you very much. Genetics. A cannabis plant, believe it or not, female plants and male plants have different genetics and different chromosomes. Males have an XY chromosome and females have an XX chromosome. Now, from naked eye, you can't really tell that, but just look internally and understand there is a genetic difference between male and female plants. Now, you can really tell the difference between the plants by their genitals. Believe it or not, plants have genitals. And for males, it's more pistils, and for females, it's more stamen. And you can tell the difference. There's an image up there right now. You can see the pistils look a little different than what the female stamen looks like. And almost those pistils will eventually give you a sign as to how they are going to be a male. And I'm going to show you that picture pretty soon. But usually, you can't really tell the difference between a male or female until about at least 2 to 4 weeks into that plant's growth cycle. And sometimes you won't even tell the plant difference between male and female until about 2 weeks into the flower cycle. So just because you saw during the vegetative cycle, and that's the vegetative cycle, that's when it's just growing. It's not flowering, it's just growing tall. And depending if you're on the indoors, that means you're giving it at least 18 hours of light, okay? Up to 24 hours, because it's only 24 hours in a day. And then, at some point, you flip it to flowering, which is 12 hours of lightness, 12 hours of darkness. And you could have been vegging for 6 weeks, and it looks like it's still a female, but then 2 weeks in the flower, bang, you find a male. And what do? We're going to talk about that soon. So, some other ways, we're going to put up another picture for me, Tommy, is how you can identify signs of a male plant. And the most common way of finding out if this plant is a male is by the pollen sacs. Yes, those pistils now turn into some kind of pollen sac. And literally, it looks like little balls. Like a plant has balls, and you can tell that those are there by looking right in between the pistils, or right at the point of the branches. You see little pistils. You also can see little ball sacs, and you look at that image, you can kind of see it right there too. Another sign said you do not sight it. Remember, I told you in 2 to 4 weeks of its growth cycle, you can tell if it's a male or female, but sometimes you can't really tell until it's in the flowering stage. But one of the signs you could tell is during the veg stage. If you don't see the pollen sacs, it's growing fast and it's growing taller than all of your other plants. most males grow a lot taller and faster than females. So that's a sign to kind of like, let me watch this guy. Another one is it grows more straight. A lot of females tend to be a little bit more bushier. So if it's growing more straight up, taller, faster, another sign it could be a male. And then less flowers. Typically you can't tell that until it's in the flower stage, and if you're really seeing less flowers at that point, it's probably too late to take it out of your grow room, and you may as well just ride it out. And I'm gonna talk about later, well, it's okay. Male plants are okay. We as males should be accepted in society as plants. And then also tighter clusters. So you see a lot of male plants have a little bit tighter nodes. Females a little bit more spaced out, and male. So those are some signs that you can, and tricks that you can use to identify a male. And the reason why people or growers prefer females over male plants, well, females typically produce more THC. They're typically more potent. But typically, if you separate the females from the males, something called sensibililia happens, and the plants become more plumper, because the plants, if the females are getting plump, looking for pollen, it's not there, and they just keep getting more plump. And that gives you a higher yield. So that's a lot of the reasons why growers would separate females and males. And also, females have a natural higher cannabinoid and terpene profile. Cannabinoids, I talked about briefly. You can always go to our Cannabis Therapy podcast to look at other episodes that explain the endocannabinoid system and how it pairs with cannabinoids. But in a short sentence, cannabinoids are hundreds of different compounds, chemical compounds in the plant. There's over hundreds of different cannabinoids, such as THC is one of the most popular cannabinoids. CBD is a popular cannabinoid. THCA, CBN. So there's a lot of, and there's hundreds of those. And then there's also terpenes. Terpenes really give you the aroma, the smell of it as well. And tied in with some of the flavonoids, it can also give you certain tastes as well. But when you pair those cannabinoids with those terpenes, you get effects. Some can make you more sleepy, some can make you more calm, some can make you horny, whatever it is, all those chemical compounds, it's like an orchestra. All of it plays. It's not just the flute, not just the drums, it all plays like a symphony. So females have a higher concentration of a lot more cannabinoids and terpenes. And then also, they do not produce seeds. Typically, they do not produce seeds on an average unless they're stressed out. And seeds, which gets me to the point of it's okay to have some male plants, because seeds right now kind of, there's been a stigma that if cannabis had seeds, that it's kind of low quality cannabis. And that typically came from the history of, when it was in the early days of Prohibition, a lot of cannabis coming from Mexico or these areas where they kind of have brickweed, where it's just grown out in the wild. There's male and females that pollinate each other, and it's really kind of low quality weed put in bricks sent over here. And people saw that association with, well, it has seeds, must be that brickweed. But you can grow high quality cannabis even though it does have seeds. Males, you can even hemp itself, going craft hemp. Males, you can still produce and give the same love and care as you would just females, and it will taste just the same, and it tastes just as good. So you don't have to just kill your whole crop. You can still ride that out, grow that, give the same love and care, and it still will be consumable. But the last thing is kind of like watermelon. If, say, genetic watermelon that was modified could produce no seeds, and then you have natural watermelon with seeds. Say it wasn't genetically modified, it was actually, there is male or there's female watermelons that doesn't have seeds, and there's male watermelons that do have seeds. End of the day, they both will taste like watermelon. And I get how having a male watermelon with seeds can get annoying, trying to, spit out the seeds and picking them out. But at the end of the day, you still could enjoy the watermelon and get to the juiciness. Ha! Cool. So where to start if you're looking to grow and say you do want female seeds? One of the ways is you want female plants, one of the ways is you can source auto-flowering seeds. And pretty much what an auto-flowering seed is that no matter what, the life cycle is within 8, 10, 11 weeks, this plant is going to flip into flower and be ripe and ready to harvest. But just because it's auto-flowering doesn't mean that it's not a male in there as well. So you still got to watch it. You still got to watch it for 2 to 4 weeks. Still got to watch it as it begins to auto-flower. But a lot of auto-flowering seeds have a higher percentage of being female. Another higher percentage of being female seed type or category is feminized seeds. Feminized seeds, if you recall what I said earlier, is that, well, females can produce seeds. What? Yes, females can produce seeds if you stress them out. And it could be because it was too hot, it was too cold, too much, it was too less of humidity, too much humidity, too much light. It's an art to growing, and if you don't keep that balance, that female plant could get stressed, overfeeding it, underfeeding it, the soil. So all these things, how much wind is blowing on it. So it could get stressed out, and it could produce seeds despite you not having any male plants in the garden. So when that female produces seeds, believe it or not, those are feminized seeds. And it is about a 90% chance that that seed from that female plant that was stressed out is also a female. So there's people who actually go into business and actually stress out plants on purpose to produce feminized seeds so that people will pay more for that higher guarantee that their seeds or plants will actually be females. So that's feminized seeds. But you still got to watch them. There's a 90% chance. So if you're really trying to keep them separate, you still want to watch them for at least 2 to 4 weeks into flower. And then the really sure way to understand if you're really trying to keep your males separate from your females and you really want just females for all the benefits we talked about earlier is cloning. If you cut up